Yo guys, welcome back to this channel, and in today's video I'm going to be telling you guys the best build for every single brawler in BRAWLERS right now. Currently we have 89 brawlers in BRAWLERS right now, and obviously that's a lot of brawlers, so I'm going to be speed running this, best builds for every single brawler. So yeah, make sure you guys like this video. If you guys enjoyed this video, please make sure you subscribe, as I really want to get to 700 subscribers as soon as possible. Please make sure you join the Discord server. It's in the links in the descriptions down below, as I really want you guys to participate in my Discord and on future videos. And without further ado, let's start it with the first brawler. Okay, so the first brawler is going to be Shelly. For Shelly, we gotta go with clay pigeons. As good cooldown. The other one doesn't do that much. It has to be clay pigeons. For now, for the star power, it has to be band-aid, because shell shocks, ever since it got nerfed like a couple of years ago, probably it was like 3 seconds, 4 seconds, but they got nerfed to 2 seconds. Now band-aid is just way better. If it's a bushy map, you gotta go with the speed gear, but if it's not a bush map, you have to go with the gadget cooldown gear and obviously the damage gear. Next up, we got Nita. For Nita, it really does depend. A lot of pros go with bear paws, a lot of pro players also go with fox fur, but in my opinion, from what I've seen, even though Nita hasn't been picked that much, it has to go with fox fur, because 14 seconds for 35% shield for 3 seconds. So it's basically, you get it every 11 seconds. This gadget is really good. And for the star power, very obvious. If it's heist, you gotta go with hyper bear, but if it's not heist, it's bounty, brawl ball, stuff like that, you gotta go with bear with me. And obviously you gotta go with the damage gear and of course the pet power gear. Next up, we got Colt. Colt, you have to go with speed loader. Every single 11 seconds you get your ammo reloaded by 2. That's just really good. But if it's really like you want to open the map a lot, you can definitely go with speed silver bullet. But in my opinion, speed load is so much better, because you can get your ammo, get your super, and then you can open the map. So yeah, next for the star power, you gotta go with magnum special. For the gears, you have to go with either damage gear, shield gear, or reload gear and shield gear. And then next up, got Bull. For Bull, it's very simple. T-bone ejector. Every 12 seconds you heal yourself 2000 health instantly. That's just way too good. For Stomper, it's useful when you're not facing against the counters for Bull, but if you don't have any Bull counters in the enemy team, you can definitely go with Stomper. Obviously very easy. Tough guy, you have to go with tough guy. But if it's heist, I've seen a lot of pro players in heist, they go with berserk, so you can definitely go with berserk in heist. And for the gears, well, it really does depend, but you definitely need the health gear. It's just way too good, and in my opinion, you gotta go with the damage gear. Next up for Brock, very easy. Rocket fuel. Every 15 seconds you open up the map. This is so good. But if you're facing against assassins or crows, Edgars, those brawlers that can jump on you and kill you, you have to go with rocket laces. Star power, very easy. More rockets, you can easily do more damage in heist and kill enemies way easier. For the gears, you definitely could go with the damage and reload gear in the flipping heist. But if it's not heist, you have to go with shield reload or shield damage. Next up, we got El Primo. El Primo, you have to go with asteroid belt. You can get so much control every 30 seconds, and it's just really good. You have to go to El Fugo with the damage gear and obviously the health gear. Next up, we got Barley. For Barley, you have to go with herbal tonics. I've seen pro players play Barley with herbal tonics in knockout and bounty so much. It's really good. Every 17 seconds you could get at least 3 or 4, maybe even 5 of these gadgets. But if you're facing against assassins, I can definitely recommend you sticky syrup mixer. Next up for the star power, very easy. Extra nauseous, dealing 200 more damage is just so good and efficient against the high save or against brawlers that really you need the kill with the damage and shield gear. Poco, such a good brawler, top 10, maybe even top 15 if you guys really are underestimating Poco. And it's a lot because of protective tunes. Every 4 seconds you get immunity from crows, crows fire, Byron's attack, all those sort of things. Even Amber's fire is just so good every 11 seconds, and you get a 4-second immunity. Imagine that, bro. It's so good. It's broken. Poco needs a nerf to this, but if you're not facing against any crows, Byrons, and Ambers, you can definitely go tuning fork, because it's still 16 seconds for 5 seconds. So you're getting every 11-second cooldown for this gadget. It's so good. Poco is like a top 10 brawler in BRAWLERS right now. You have to obviously go with Screeching Solo, but if you're going with the Poco double tank, you have to go to Capo. For the gears, it's pretty simple, speed and damage gear, but if it's not a bushy map, you can definitely go with the damage gear and gadget cooldown gear. Next up for Rosa, another absolutely very annoying and cheesy brawler in the meta right now, and it's because of Grow Light. You can make the map like Cavern Churn, one of your worst nightmares. Obviously, because of that, you have to obviously go with Plant Life, but pros do also use Thorny Gloves, but in my opinion, Plant Life now, because of this Glow Light, Plant Life is so much better. Obviously, you have to go with the speed gear and damage gear. Next up, we got Jessie, not really a good brawler in the meta right now, has fallen off for some time now. But if it's, heist map, you have to go with Recalling Spring. If it's not a heist map, Spark Plug every 15 seconds, really good. Obviously, Energize and Dead Damage and Pet Power gear. Next up for Dynamite, every single time you have to go with Satchel Charge, even if it's like 30 seconds, 40 seconds. This is so much better than Fidget Spinner. Obviously, you got to go with Demolition and the damage and shield gear. Next up, we got Tick. For Tick, it's very obvious. Lasso Roll every 15 seconds. You get saved from this Lasso Roll against Edgar's and Miko's. And obviously, you have to go with the Automat Tick Reload. Sorry for the misspell. And you have to go with either the Mythic Gear, Shield Gear, or Damage Gear, Shield Gear. Next up for 8-Pet, every single time you have to go with extra credits in Heist, but if it's not Heist, you can definitely go with Cheat Cartridge. And for boosted boosters, again, if it's Heist, but if it's not Heist, you have to go with Plugged In with the Damage Gear and the Health Gear. Next up for Rico, every single time you have to go with Multi-Ball Launcher, the Super Bouncy and Damage and Reload Gear, but if you need more shield, you can definitely go with the Reload Gear, shield Gear, or the Damage Gear and Shield Gear. Next up for Dowel, you have to go with Tar Bowel every single time, but if it's Heist, you have to go with Recalling Rotator every 12 seconds. You can get more damage to the enemy and the enemy's Heist. Also, you have to go with the Steel Hoops with the damage and health gear. Next up for Penny, you have to go with Salty Barrel. Penny has been falling off the meta slowly, but this is the only thing that's keeping her alive. You have to also go with Heavy Covers and the damage and Pet Power gear. Next up with the one that is so underrated in the meta right now because of this gadget right here, Heat Injector. You can have this on the ground for like 4 or 5 seconds and a 15 cooldown timer. It's so good. It's broken. Carl needs a nerf because of this Heat Injector. You have to also with Protective Pirouette and the gadget cooldown gear, and of course the damage gear. Also, you have to go with Fnatic Booster with Jackie and Counter Crusher with the gadget cooldown and the damage gear. For Gus, Cookie Popper, obviously the main one to go, even though this has a 10-second cooldown, this is just miles better with the Spirit Animal and the damage and shield gear. For both, very easy, Super Totem, Circling Eagle if it's a bushy map, but if it's not a bushy map, Snare a Bear with the damage and reload gear. But if it's a bushy map, Speed Reload or Speed Damage is the way to go. Next up for AMS, always have to go with Friend Zoner with Bad Karma if it's Heist, but if it's not Heist, you have to go with Hype. But if you're facing against assassins and just tanks in general, you have to go with Bad Karma with the Speed Gear and Damage Gear. But if it's not a bushy map, you have to go with the damage gear and gadget cooldown gear. Next up for Stu, such a good brawler, top 5, top 10 in the meta right now because of Speed Zoner and the Gasso Heal Star Power with the damage and shield gear. For Piper, very easy, auto aimer if it's assassins. If it's not assassins and it's a long range map, you have to go with Homemade. Obviously, sniping with the damage and shield gear is the way to go. For Pam, you have to go with Scrap Sucker with the Mama Squeeze Star Power and the gadget cooldown gear and the damage gear. But if it's a bushy map, you can definitely go with the speed gear, gadget cooldown, or speed gear, damage gear. Next up for Frank, very easy, is this irresistible attraction, obviously the way to go. But if the brawlers that you're playing against for Frank and they counter your super, you also always have to go with the active noise cancelling, and you have to go with Power Grab with the damage and health gear. For BB, very simple, Vitamin Booster with the damage and gadget cooldown gear with batting stand, obviously. Next up for B, such a broken brawler in the meta right now because of Rattle Hive. Every 17 seconds you get 4 annoying bees up to 1200 damage. It's so annoying, so good. B is one of the best brawlers in the meta right now with the honeycomb and the damage and shield gear. Next up for Nani, return to sender all the way. But if you're playing against Heist and you want the sneaky so much damage in the high save, you have to go with warping time. Obviously, if you're playing against Pipers and Ticks, low HP brawlers, you have to go with autofocus, but if it's not those, you gotta go with Tempered Steel with the damage and supercharged gear. But I do recommend you also getting the shield gear because that's also really good for Nani. For Edgar, ever since the cooldown gadget reworks, it has been horrible for Edgar. It's just getting worse and worse in the meta. Honestly, there's no really good recommendations for Edgar from how bad he is right now, but obviously you have to go with hardcore to get more shield. But if you're playing ladder, I guess you can go with Let's Fly, Fisticuffs, and that damage and shield gear. For Gref, very simple. If there's a lot of walls you have to break open, then you can definitely go with Piggy Bank. But if it's not many walls, you can go with the coin shower, with the keep the change, stop power, and the reload and damage gear. For Gom, very simple. Radio check, X Factor, damage, and shield. But if it's a bushy map, you can definitely go with Watchtower. Next up for Bonnie, you gotta go with Sugar Rush. This is not good at all. And the Black Powder and the gadget cooldown and the damage gear. Next up for Gale, you gotta go with Twisters all the way. But if you're playing Heist and you want to be cheeky and have a cheesy comp, you can definitely go with Spring Ejector with the freezing, snow, stop power, and the damage and shield gear. For Colette, always you have to go with Gotcha. Like, it's very simple, very easy. If you're playing against Assassins, you have to go with Push It. But if it's Heist, you gotta go with Max Tax with the damage cooldown, gadget cooldown gear, and the damage gear. Next up for Belle, very easy, reverse polarity or whatever it's called. But if you want to have a lot of nest eggs in the map, you can definitely go with that, with the positive feedback and the damage and reload gear. But if you're playing against Pipers and Nanis that just two-shot you, you have to go with the damage gear and the shield gear. Next up, my main brawler, it has to be Rotten Banana. Rotten Banana has been so good, 8 seconds, and you get 40% rage only for 10% of your health. That's just so good. You have to go to Rotten Banana now and the first bash. And if it's not a bushy map, you have to go with the health gear and the damage gear. But if it's a bushy map, shield and damage is the way to go. Next up, we got obviously Lola, such a good brawler in the meta, so underrated too. You can go with lane, you can go with mid for Lola, and it's because of 11 seconds cooldown for this gadget right here. Freeze frame, you get 50% shield for your eco for 4 seconds. For 4 seconds, that's so good. You have to go to freeze frame. And underrated star power, sealed with a kiss, healing yourself and your teammates with damage and reload gear. Next up for Sam, not really a great ball in the meta, but once his hypercharge comes out, which is going to be on Monday apparently, he's going to be really good. This is definitely the better gadget with the hearty recovery, stop power, and the damage and health gear. For Mandy, very underrated. The hypercharge is very underrated. You can get it so easily and you can get it so fast and you can get so many kills. Obviously, you have to go with Caramelize. You slow them down and you hit them with that hypercharge kill. Next up, you have to go to star power, in my sights, and the damage and shield gear. Next, we gotta go with Maisie, disengage, very easy, tremors with the damage and gadget cooldown gear. Hank, such a meme brawler, now turned into one of the best brawlers in the game, and obviously gotta go with Barricade. With it, it's gonna blow star power and the health and damage gear. Next up for Pearl, Overcooked, 15 seconds, and it's going to be overtime this start gadget, so it's really good. And the heat, shield, star power, and the gadget cooldown gear and damage gear. Lion and Lori, the twins, are finally falling off the meta, which is very sad because I really like them, but it's kind of deserved. You have to obviously go with this star power gadget right here, or their fall back, and you have to go with this one if you're facing against assassins and tanks. But if it's not them, you gotta go to protect, and the damage and shield gear. For Angelo, you gotta go with Stinging Flight if you're facing against assassins and stuff like that. But if there's a lot of walls, you gotta go with Master Fletcher. This is such an underrated. I've seen a lot of pros, especially EMEA and APAC, use this. And obviously Empower, but if there's even a slight amount of water, you gotta go with Flow with the gadget cooldown gear and the damage gear. Next up for Barry, you gotta go with Friendship is great. Obviously Flow is fine, and the damage and shield gear. Next up, we got the Shade, such an underrated brawler. Shitampo played so good with Shade. EMEA thinks they are Shitampo, but they were just so bad with the Shade. Obviously, long arms is the way to go, with the hardening hood and the damage and gadget cooldown gear. But Shade does also need shield, so in my opinion, you can also go with the damage gear and the shield gear. Next up, Meeple, gotta go with Mansions of Meeple, but if you're facing against assassins and tanks, you gotta go with Rage Quit and rule bending star power with the damage and shield gear. Next up, Mortar's very fast survival shovel, cold snake, damage and shield gear. But in my opinion, the other best build will be damage and bat storm, the mythic gear. Next up, Tara, very easy support from beyond. If there's a bushy map, you gotta go with psychic enhancer. And obviously the black portal is really good, but in my opinion, healing shade is way better with the damage and pet power gear. But if it's a bushy map, you can definitely go the speed gear and pet power gear. Next up, for Gene, you gotta be very simple and easy. You gotta go with vengeful spirits, obviously. But if you're facing assassins and tanks, you gotta go with lamp blowout, obviously magic puffs. And this all really depends. If it's a bushy map, I recommend going with the speed gear and vision gear. If it's not a bushy map at all, you gotta go damage gear and obviously the mythic gear. Next up, we got Max, such an underrated brawler in the meta right now. We got phase shifter, run gun, and the damage and shield gear. For Mr. P, such a broken brawler in the meta right now. It's also really good brawler in the meta because of the hypercharge. You gotta go with Serve Bell and the revolving door with the damage and pet power gear. Sprout, not really that great in the meta, but this really does depend. If there's grass, you gotta go with garden mulcher. But if it's not grass, you gotta go with transplant. Same with the star power. If it's grass, photosynthesis. Not grass, overgrowth, damage and supercharged gear is the way to go. But I also recommend damage and shield. You gotta go with booster shots and the melees, the damage and shield gear for Byron. And for Squeak, this gadget is so underrated right now, so I do recommend you also using this if you have. But I still think, yeah, I'm gonna go with Wind Up with the chain reaction and the damage and shield gear. So yeah, for Lou, another really good brawler in the meta right now, Cryo Syrup, Hypothermia with the supercharged gear and the damage gear. For Ruffs, you gotta go with air support, you gotta go with air superiority, damage gear and shield gear is the way to go. For Buzz, reverse boy, but if it's a bushy map, you can definitely go with X-rays. And in my opinion, tough pirouette is much better, but iShops, I've seen pro players use this with the health gear and the damage gear. Fang, obviously roundhouse kick, but if you want more area control and you're playing in hot zone, you can definitely go with Corn Fu. And you gotta go with Divine Souls and the gadget cooldown gear and the damage gear. For Eve, very simple, gotta go Unnatural Order and the damage gear and the mythic gear right here. Janet, very simple, drop the base, full core warm up and the speed and damage gear. But if you're playing bushy map, you can definitely go speed and vision. If it's not a bushy map, I recommend you going damage shield or damage health. Next up for Oris, flat spattle or whatever its name is with the ink refills. And actually it really does depend honestly what we want to go, but definitely you have to go with the damage gear and supercharge gear to get the hypercharge faster. Busters, slow-mo replay, Kevlar vest, damage gear and gadget cooldown gear. But you can also go with the speed gear and damage gear if it's a bushy map. For Gray, walking canes, very easy, new perspective with the damage gear and shield gear. RT, again, very easy. If you're facing against assassins and tanks, you gotta go with outline. But if there's no assassins or flipping tanks, you gotta go with hacks, the quick mats and the health and damage gear. Next up, got Willow, not really that good in the meta. You gotta go Dive, Love is Blind, damage gear and shield gear. Doug, very easy, extra mustard, self-service, damage gear and gadget cooldown gear. Very easy here. Also for the Chuck, you gotta go with the Ghost Rings, and this really does depend. But in my opinion, tickets please, you can get more ammo with the damage gear and obviously the health gear. For Charlie, you gotta go with spiders, you gotta go with digestives, obviously, but this is also very underrated, Slimy, with the damage gear and gadget cooldown gear. For Miko, very easy, clipping, screen, and monkey business, but if it's heist, you can definitely go with record smash. This is much better in heist, the damage gear and shield gear. For Melody, very easy, interlude, extended mix, damage gear and gadget cooldown gear. Lily, again very easy, vanish, spiky, and the damage gear and gadget cooldown gear. Same with flipping Clancy. You gotta go with tactical retreat, it's so much better than the snappy shooting. And recon with the damage gear and gadget cooldown gear. For Mo, again very easy, dodge, digging, and skipping stones with the damage gear and shield gear. Juju, again very easy, you gotta go with Elementus with guarded Gree,
Gris or whatever his name is, if you're playing against, you know, Bells and Nanis. But if you want to slow the enemies down, you can definitely go with Numbing Needle, the damage gear, and the gadget cooldown gear. Next up, we got, of course, my boy Ollie, just came in the meta right now. Obviously, you have to go with Regulate and Renegade, the damage and health gear. Obviously, a new brawler, Finks, you gotta go back to the Finksture with whatever this name is, and the damage gear and the gadget cooldown gear. Spike, very easy. Life Plant, you gotta go with Curveball with the health gear, not health gear, shield gear, and the mythic gear. But I've seen pro players play this in Heist. So next up, got Crow, very easy. Defense boosters with Karen Crow with the shield gear and obviously the mythic gear. Next up, we got Leon, very easy. Lollipop Drop, Invisi-Heal, damage gear, and mythic gear. Next up for Sandy, we got Sweet Dreams, very easy. Root Sands, and the speed gear and damage gear. But if it's not a pushy map, you can definitely go with the mythic gear and damage gear. Next up, we got Amber. Obviously, very easy for Amber. You gotta go Dancing Flames. Just destroys enemies with this. Even with the bug fix, this is such a good gadget. And obviously, Wild Flames with the reload gear and damage gear. But for Amber, you can go with any of these. You can go with Speed, Vision. You can go with the mythic gear. You can go with the gadget cooldown gear. Next up, we got Meg. Meg, very easy. Jolting Volts. Healing for 5 seconds. Every 5 seconds is really good. Obviously, if it's assassins and tanks you're facing against, you can definitely go with the heavy metal. But if it's not tanks or assassins, you can definitely go with force field, the damage gear, and health gear. Next up for Surge, very easy. Power shield. But if you're not really getting the super and you're not really comfortable with not getting the super, you can definitely go with Power Surge with the Serve Ice Cold. But this one to the max is very good in solo showdown because this is useless with the damage gear and shield gear. But if it's a bushy map, speed gear and damage gear is the way to go. And for Chester, you gotta go with the Candy Bean with the single Bellomania and the damage gear and shield gear. Next up for Cordelia's, you gotta go with Poison Mushrooms with Mushroom Kingdom with the damage gear and obviously the shield gear. Kit, very cheesy brawler, obviously with Cheeseburger, but it really does depend on what you want to go. A lot of people play this, a lot of people play this, so it really does depend on you. But if you're playing with a more cheesy strategy, you gotta go with Cardboard Box with Overly Attached. But if this Power Hungry is for solo showdown, the damage gear and shield gear or damage gear, and of course the gadget cooldown gear. Next up, we got Draco, a brawler that's fallen off the meta by a landslide. You gotta go Last Stand, Shredding, obviously you gotta go, but I've seen pro players play Expose a lot too with the gadget cooldown gear and the damage gear. And last but not least, we got my boy, not actually my boy, Food Samurai Kenji. Obviously you gotta go with this healing gadget with the Nemesis star power and the gadget gear, gadget cooldown gear, and the damage gear. Well, that is it for today's video, guys. If you guys enjoyed this video and want me to make more of these types of content, please make sure to like the video right now. Please make sure to subscribe so I can get to 700 subscribers as soon as possible. Please make sure to join my Discord server. It is the links in the descriptions down below to participate in future videos and supporting me, and you can chat with me too. And well, that is it for today's video. Peace.